Shut up and sit down.
Howdy guys, it's Andy from Big Mac's Workshop and Painting Studio, and today it's Warcry. This is the Iron Golem Ogor Breacher, which is a great model. As you can see, there's loads of detail on it. Now I wanted to do this like the GW box art with a shiny metal armour, but I couldn't quite get it right, so this is a bit more of a standard matte colour. So starting off with the flesh, as I always do. Now that's Bugman's Glow. We're going for a bit of a cooler flesh tone this time round. So as always, thinned it down nicely, and we'll get a couple of layers of the Bugman's Glow to get something to work with. So after the Bugman's Glow's gone down, we're starting to add a little bit of miskatonic grey. This is a slightly different colour mix to what I would normally use. As I said, I went for something a little bit cooler, a little bit paler, and the miskatonic grey really goes well into the Bugman's Glow. It doesn't change the colour too much, so you still get that sort of nice skin tone colour, but it softens it up and brings it up a nice steady pace. So now I'm adding a little bit more in there, and as you can see, I'm just glazing the skin tones up. I'm not being too careful at this stage because there's a lot of work to go into this skin, because it's really interesting, really good details on here. So just adding a little bit more of the miskatonic grey again. As you can see, it's starting to make a very pale skin tone at this stage, and we're getting a really cool sort of skin texture, and it's just adding the layers up nice and steady, focusing on the highlighted areas. I want to leave some of the Bugman's Glow visible, but not too much of it, because we don't want the rich brown to be too obvious. So even more miskatonic grey. It's probably about 75% miskatonic grey at this point. And again, I'm starting to focusing really on the extreme highlights at this stage. And we're going to really bring those high points up. I'm stretching some of the pigment into the darker sections, just to make sure the blends are nice. So now this is a touch more miskatonic grey. It's almost pure, it's not quite yet, and we're just really focusing on the most extreme sections of the highlighting area. We've got a little bit more level to go. It's still a very pale skin now. We're trying to keep it alive looking, but it needs to sort of offset the armour, as that's going to be quite a warm colour. So now we're at pure miskatonic grey at this stage. Just focusing right on the extreme points, and just feathering the paint into the darker sections, just to blend in the colour, as we want nice smooth blends. We don't want to have the highlights in real obvious clumps, because that would just destroy the effect. So now we've added a bit of thin down Reekland flesh shade, just to add a bit more depth to the recesses. To be honest, it's a bit of a mistake, I realised after, but as you can see, I'm just feathering the paint out with a damp brush, just to stop the paint from pooling up too much. So now I've added a touch of Hellbound flesh. Now this is kind of a yellowy colour. It's just to soften up those dark sections again. I'm just starting to feather the paint into the areas where the flesh shaders stretched a little bit, where I don't want it to be, and just to soften up those darker sections. So I'm back onto the miskatonic grey now. As you can see, I'm starting to highlight it up. I'm also softening up those recessed areas where the shaders are a little bit strong still, and this is just going to bring a bit more life to the model, a bit more brightness to the highlights. So now I've added some pale blue grey by Vallejo into the miskatonic grey, and this is going to be pretty much the top highlight. As you can see, I'm just really focusing on the most extremely high areas, and it's just going to be just touching the areas, just spread out the highlights a little bit. So it's a little bit more of the same colour. I'm just stretching those highlights and really trying to soften up those deepest recesses, as we're a little bit strong. I want to feather the paint into the darker sections just to soften them up a little bit. You don't want too strong mixes, so you get a really nice subtle transition from the dark to the lights. And now I've added some violet into the Regal and Flesh shader, and as you can see I'm just painting it right into the deepest sections. Now this is to add a nice bit of a contrast between the armour plates and the flesh. It's going to really set the flesh against the armour, really make it look quite shaded. But you're not going into the deep recesses onto the skin itself. This is just to add a little bit of contrast against the armour plates. So onto the armour now, and this is German Red Brown, which is a primer by Vallejo. So just adding this as a nice base layer for the armour plates. It goes on really nice. It's a really smooth paint to work with. But just obviously, as always, we're keeping it thin. We want to take a couple of layers to get the nice smooth colours. So now I'm on to Deep Red, which is a scale 75. As you can see, I'm starting to feather out some highlights. This is really thin down, and I'm just leaving touches of the base layer showing and the most deepest recesses around. Also keeping a little bit of the dark colour showing around the spiky sections as well. So now I've added some blood red into the mixture. I'm doing exactly the same thing. Again, really thin down paint. We're leaving some of the other colours showing through. This is just going to allow the transition to build up really nicely. Now I've also chosen this right hand shoulder pad, as we look at it, to be the highlighter direction. So the light's coming from that side. So I'm going to be painting all the armour with that in mind. So on to the next layer, and that's blood red now. Again, scale 75. You could use Mephiston red for this, or something along them sort of lines. And we're just building up those highlights ever so slowly. You want to leave some of the darker colours showing through, but you can also stretch it out a little bit over there. So long as you keep the paint thin, you can transition the colours a little bit more, get some nice tidy blends between the two colours. Next on the list is Red Tone by Vallejo. I went for this over Caribbean Crimson, as it's a little bit darker, a little bit less cartoony, and it's going to use this to tie all the different layers together. And we're getting a nice thin wash. As always, I've thinned this down with some thinners, but you can just water will work just fine. Getting a nice layer on this, and this is just to tie in all the different layers together. So once that's dry, which takes us a few minutes, it is scale 75's blood red and Aldebaran red mixed, about 50-50, and I'm just starting to focus now on the highlighted areas. As you can see, I'm starting to leave certain areas a little bit darker now, just to start bringing that light spot from the direction of the sun. So now it is pure Aldebaran red, and you can start to see the darker areas now are just starting to show through. The Aldebaran red is quite a sunny colour. It's quite bright, but it goes over these lovely. You get a real nice transition through these other colours. Again, keeping it thin so I can feather the paint through and get the blends nice. After that, it is Mars Orange. I'm just starting to add some chips into the painted into the chips of the armour. As you can see, it's already got some painted in, and it's just letting it. Adding the bright colour to the chips really allows you to see them when you're working with it, and gives you a nice highlighted area as well. So now I've got some chrome. I'm using a Winsor Newton 00 here, and I'm focusing on the inside edges of the chips. If you do mess up, it's fine. Just go back over with the brighter colour again, just to thin it out a little bit, and then you can always just get some of the darker colours from the previous layers, just to even it out a little bit, and you get a nice effect. So, onto the trim now. This is Decayed Metal by Scale 75. I like this, it gives you a really good coverage over blacks. You could use Warlock Bronze, you get a slightly more red tone to it. I wanted the gold a little bit more on the yellow side, because obviously with it being such a very vibrant, bright suit of armour, the yellow would have just sets it off a little bit nicer. Onto the steelworks, and that is Metallic Black by Vallejo. Lead Belcher or Iron Breaker works fine. I tend to find that Metallic Black gives you a much nicer base. It goes over better than some of the lighter colours, and it does give you a lot of work room as you're starting out a little bit darker. So now going back to the armour, the plates again, and this is a mix of Aldebaran Red and Mars Orange, and I'm just starting to work on the extreme highlight areas, just like the the edges of the plates. I'm also starting to pick out some particularly bright spots on the armour as well. After that, I'm doing exactly the same thing with Mars Orange. I'm just really picking out the most extremely bright areas where I want the light to strike first. So across the top of the helmet, I'm going to do a little bit of a line across the top of his right shoulder, also across the leading edges of anything on the right hand side, just where the light would hit light strikes. So onto the silver work again. This is Oily Steel by Vallejo. It's a nice base colour. It works well over the metallic black, as metallic black is such a dark colour. It adds a lot of depth to the mid-tone steels. Something along the lines of Iron Breaker again would work just fine. Next layer is Chainmail. So this is a sort of a slightly lighter mid-tone colour. What we've got is we're working towards the left-hand side of the chain link, as the light seems to be. I've got it painted so it's coming from over his right-hand shoulder. So the left-hand edges on this, as a slightly forward, would be the edges what are struck first by the light. And onto my old favourite, which is Chrome. As you can see, I'm just picking out the extreme edges of a few of the scale links where they would be hit first, and just adding a little bit of a dot to them, just to brighten them up, give a nice highlight effect. So now I've added some normal oil onto the scale links, and these are getting painted directly into the darker sections. It's not going as a classic wash. I'm just painting exactly where I need the colour to be, just to add the real depth into the links. I've done exactly the same thing on the chainmail at the back as well. So I've started onto the hammer and his weapons now. I've gone for a mid-tone to start off with. This is Oily Steel by Vallejo, as I wanted to be able to take these up and down. I want the weapons and the steelwork to be really cool, a real cool tone. So I'm going to. I want it to be able to move up and down the colour range a little bit more, rather than just starting off at dark and bring it up. So normal first. That's just adding depth into the model. As you can see, a flat steel on its own always looks a bit rubbish. You need to put something in there just to start adding some colour and some depth into the models. So normal oil to start off with, just to give me something to work with. So now I'm adding a touch of Agrax Earthshade just to grime it up a little bit, and this does me a bit of a disservice, as it also adds some warmth to the metalwork, but it does tarnish the equipment up nicely. So I've added this around certain areas of the model just to make it look a little bit more grimy, a bit more gritty, bringing some life to it. So after that it is Oily Steel again, just to bring it all back to a solid colour, leaving some of the wash showing through. As you can see, I've focused a lot of the washes around the rivets and what have you, and bringing the colours all together, so it's starting to get a nice even tone at this point. So now I've got a mix of Null and Agrax, and what I'm doing here is, again, I'm adding more depth, also tarnishing the metalwork up again, but this is really thinned down, so I don't want the wash to stick to any surfaces. I want it to just sink into the recesses. So it's really thinned down, it's really dark, so it's just adding some nice tarnish effects to the armour plating. So I'm going back onto the trim again for a bit, and this is Vallejo's Gold. I'm starting to use this as a highlight along the all of the trim, again focusing towards the edges where the light strikes first. It will be pressed out a little bit into the darker sections as well. So next is Bright Brass. So as you can see, I'm starting off with a stripe across the top of the right hand spike, and I'm also doing a little bit on the left hand spikes as well. And then now it is a touch of chrome has been mixed in, and I'm doing exactly the same thing as I did with the pure bright brass, but on a lesser extent. As you can see, I'm just feathering that paint out a little bit, and just letting the thinned out paint just do the work, and I'm only touching the most extreme areas. And finally, it is a little bit of chrome just to finish it off, just where on the final points of the light strike, so you get a really cool, nice transition between the dark decayed metal right up to that chrome just over the touch of the yellowy golds, and really makes a nice nice effect, make it all proper, real three-dimensional. So now I've added some blue tone, which is obviously thinned down, and I'm adding that to the metalwork, and this is going to cool down the metalwork, just to add a bit of contrast from the warmth of the reds and the pinks to the entire model, so it's not looking too warm. And it's just really going to add that nice contrast to the model itself. After that, I'm edging it with a bit of chrome. Now I'm trying to keep this as tidy as possible. If you do make a mistake, it's easy to repair, but just take your time and just really focus on what you're doing, as you don't want to ruin any of the other paintwork you've done. Onto the armour plates again, I'm adding some more Mars Orange to the edges. I'm really, as you can see, I'm using one of my narrower brushes. I'm really focusing on those light strike areas, adding a touch of definition just to the most extreme corners of the model itself. Also going to add some more highlight into the top of the shoulder, just adding a couple of little light edge highlights onto the inside edge of the top of the shoulder pad. And now I've added a touch of Rakkar flesh into this Mars Orange, and I'm just working the same thing, but I'm focusing on right in the middle of the highlights, so just really focusing that them light strikes onto the most obvious areas. And there you are, one Warcry Ogor Breacher. Great model. I really enjoyed painting this dude. As I said, I wanted to paint him with a more metallic armour, but I did a bit of an experiment. It didn't work out as I'd hoped, but I did actually learn a few things on this, and I quite enjoyed painting him. So as always, got some thank yous to make. Massive thank yous to you guys for watching and listening to me waffle on for the last 20 odd minutes. If you'd like to see any more of this sort of content, or any of our other stuff, we do all kinds of different videos. Hit like, hit subscribe, share with your friends. It's a massive help if you do that. Also got some thank yous to make. So huge thank yous to our patrons, who are the Oak Boys, Matt, Ludwig Hofbauer, Warren, D. Wack, Kit Lindquist, Acmus of Dawn, and Mark. Huge thank yous to you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. Also, thank you to the Outposts, which are our affiliate link. If you check out the link in the description, if you ever buy anything from the Outposts, use our link. You get your standard discounts from them, and we get 5% store credit, so that really helps us out as well. So if you could please do that, that helps us massively. If you would like to join us on Patreon, the link's in the description. You get early access to all our videos and also extra competition entries as well. It's just a thank you to us. So huge thank yous to you guys for watching, and we shall catch you in the next one, guys. Ta-ra!